Okay, I will start because you've all come here on your Saturday morning and I just want to make sure we finish by 1 o'clock. Hi, my name is Ariana Beatty. Together with Hannah and Jenny, we've called you here this morning to find out what interest and resources there are in Hexham to organise a Hexham-wide response to the unfolding Ukrainian refugee crisis. Take a look around you. I think we can safely say our hunch was right. Hexham people want to come together to support each other, support others. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Let me introduce the little organisation team of this first phase. We've got Hannah Ruszczyk. Is the sound okay? It seems we're over. Yep, okay. We've got Hannah Ruszczyk, who is a human geographer at Durham University and researches how refugees, migrants and asylum seekers interact with technology and biometric data. Hannah worked for the United Nations in different countries for over a decade. We've also got Jenny Muir. Miles, sorry. who works for CNTW, the Mental Health Trust, as a project lead in their innovations team. Jenny also worked with Bosnian refugees in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s during the war there. I myself am just simply interested in getting a community together to support each other because I believe we can do so much more if we work together as a community. We'd like to thank Hexham Community Partnership for their support in getting the word out there and maybe taking this on further, the Beaumont Hotel for giving us this lovely room to meet in today, and also Robson Print for the lovely posters. And we also have James and Julian Ackerman here today, the two young gentlemen there who will help with any techie questions should you not have filled in the survey yet. There is a link on your table and the QR code. If you could just register that you're here, then you will be on our email list and we can inform you of any updates near the time. Okay. So if everybody could just be reminded to switch their phones off, I think that's important as well. So the purpose of this meeting is to scope what interest there is in Hexham and what resources for a town-wide response to the unfolding Ukrainian refugee crisis we have. It is also a chance for you to meet each other and make hopefully useful connections. We are focusing on the emergency in Ukraine today, but acknowledge that there are conflicts all over the world. We three here have not got any answers or solutions for Hexham's response to the refugee crisis. Today is just about finding out what your needs and/or ideas are and discuss next steps. The three of us have spent many hours on reaching this point in otherwise busy lives and would expect project groups to form and take on the coordination of the next steps themselves. We had a very fruitful meeting with community representatives on Wednesday night. 54 people were there and important networks and offers of resources were made, which we have captured. And I would say today we've probably got more than 54 here, which is wonderful. The results of this meeting with you and the community representatives meeting will be evaluated early next week by us, and you will all receive an email to inform you of the structure that ultimately the community of Hexham want to use to support not just hosts, but everyone who is part of an effective Hexham-wide response to the Ukrainian refugee crisis. We have a couple of speakers for you this morning, and results of the survey that most of you took part in. There will then be smaller group discussions and summaries. We will be finished by 1 p.m. and hope you enjoy. Good morning. Thank you. I'll pass over to Hannah now.
Hi everyone. It's great to see so many people here. When we started thinking about, it's great to see so many people here today on a Saturday. We really are grateful that you've taken your time to come here. We had no clue how many people would show up on Wednesday night and today. So the fact that it's sort of standing room only is a testament to the community's interest. As Ariana said, I'm an academic at Durham, and for the past 18, I'm not an expert, but I have been researching how refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers are treated in different countries and how they interact with digital technology and biometric data. So I've been looking at Greece, the UK, Lebanon, and Jordan. And I'm also Polish, and my Polish family in Poland some of them are hosting multiple families and others are coming together as family units and providing stable, steady income for the refugees in their own way. So what makes this Ukrainian crisis situation so particular? It's the largest and the fastest refugee crisis in the world since World War II, and it's on European soil. Over 4 million refugees or people have left the Ukraine as of last week, and millions are still internally displaced within the Ukraine. Poland, with a population of 38 million, has taken 2.3 million refugees as of last Tuesday, according to the UNHCR. And already 150,000 children are in schools in Warsaw. Now, if you think about the numbers, Moldova, so Poland has taken about 6% of its population as refugees in under a month. Moldova has taken 15% equivalent refugees. They have a population of 387,000 and they have a population of 2.6 million and they took 390,000 refugees in under a month. If the UK had been close by to the Ukraine, the UK with a population of 67 million would have taken 4 million. That would be 6% of the population. So that's just the scale that we're talking about. In Poland and in the bordering countries, the effort has been grassroots driven. It's been driven by the Ukrainian diaspora that lives in Poland and in other places. And the Russian aggression triggers anxiety in people. There's a palpable fear. But there are limits to civil society responses, both in Poland, Moldova, other countries. Everyone says that it's the right thing to do. So what do we know about the European Union response? As we know, the UK is not in the EU. The EU has issued a temporary protection scheme. No visas are required for Ukrainians. There's free movement between countries for Ukrainians. There's free access to healthcare, education, and most importantly, the right to work, because people always want to take care of themselves rather than being a charity case. So the UK context. The UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, believes that the UK's Nationality and Borders Bill, which just got passed last week, will penalize most refugees seeking asylum in the UK. It's creating an asylum model that undermines established international refugee protection rules and practices. So the UNHCR has warned that this bill, or soon to be law, undermines the 1951 Refugee Convention, which was created after the mass displacement in the EU, or in Europe, after World War II. And the UK is a signatory to this convention. The Conservative Party's law will make the UK one of the most anti-refugee countries in the world. So when we think about the UK government's response to the Ukrainian crisis, we know that it's punitive, hostile, onerous, and results in a highly problematic situation. Hence, meetings such as this being held all around the UK right now. Government guidance is lacking. Leading refugee organizations in the UK do not know what is going on. So the government, the Home Office, its private contractors, and even the Sanctuary Foundation are all part of this government methodology or way of enacting that makes it really difficult for those of us on a local level to help to support Ukrainians who want to come here. There's visa requirements, everything has to be online, documentation in English, book and attend meetings. So where does that bring us now? We know from disaster studies that in moments of crisis, the reality is disrupted and ways of being and acting can be changed. And that's where we are right now. We have the power, collectively, through coordination between public bodies, civil society organizations, and citizens, to make a change. We need to push this government to change its strategies. related to refugees, and in particular the Ukrainians at the moment. So some of us came together, Hexham Together for Ukraine. We really want to create a short, medium, and long-term strategy that is sustained and sustainable for us as a community, as multiple communities. This crisis, this war, will not be over in 6 months, and it won't be over in a year. 5 years later, we're still going to be dealing with the ramifications of this war as other refugee crises around the world, whether it's the Venezuelans or the Syrians, or even in sub-Saharan Africa. So whatever we do now, we need to think about the long-term approach. We're going to have food security. Okay. So we're going to have food security issues. We're going to have more wars. There's so much that's going to happen as a fallout from this Ukrainian, from Putin's war in Russia. So in Hexham, we need to come up with a short, medium, and long-term strategy. We know that we need local authority support. We know that we need the county level. We know that we need the central government. We know that we need to tap into resources that are here in the Northeast, Northumberland, Newcastle, the Northumberland County for Sanctuary, the Newcastle groups. So we're trying to figure out who's doing what and to tell them that here in Hexham we're interested to engage on other scales. We need to be a community, and we can't do this alone as individuals. So that's all I'm going to say. Now our next speaker, her name is Leah Vollering, and Leah has been working with women and others in crisis for decades. She's worked in Latin America, she's worked with victims of torture, she works through art, and she creates safe spaces for people in need. So Leah, would you like to talk for a moment?
Okay, well, thank you for this opportunity to share, and I think it's great to see so many people here gathered and willing to do something about what's happening in Ukraine. And it's a great opportunity, a bit repeating maybe what Hannah said, but I want to stipulate as well, I just hope that this opportunity of reaching out to refugees coming from Ukraine also help us to open up spaces for asylum seekers that are already here in the UK and change the policy, what has been for decades, well, how long? Long time about hostility. And I said, I feel a bit strange because here we are talking about how do we welcome them into our homes, into our community. On Sunday I will be standing outside what is now called the Durban site removal center for immigrants, where women, asylum seekers, are detained with the threat that they were going to be deported in this awful place that actually was a youth prison and notorious for the abuse that took place. So it's an awful place. So I think it's the contrast, and I think we need an approach that is welcoming to all. And also I want to say what is important is that because now it's the beginning of April, we are aware of the rising cost, living cost for everybody here, is how can we be inclusive to people here as well, because if not we are going to create a divide. So there's a lot of things we need to think of. But if it has to be sustained and sustainable, we need to take all these things on board. But I think it's such a great opportunity, and such a great opportunity as well, as a community here in Hexham, to come together and deepen our relationship. Because as the world looks like at the moment, I think more refugees will come and more support of each other is needed. So yeah, I'm not an expert, but I think refugees, asylum seekers have been part and have enriched my life for over 40 years now. I was 17 when I joined an Amnesty International theatre group, and there I came across a woman from Chile and a woman from Uruguay, and together we made theatre and we explored the questions about oppression. But also, I think what I really learned is what you say so beautifully, there for the grace of God go I. You know, that I really hit home at that age. It could have been me if I had been born in another time, in another country. So it is just luck that we are here in a safe country. So then I went to work in Guatemala, where I worked with refugees returning from Mexico back to Guatemala. And then I was part of a peace and reconciliation project over there. And that's where I was told that you can set a date when war starts, but there is no date when war finishes. The effects go on for generations. And that's the sad thing. And that's why we don't know when it ends. And then in 2003, I joined the residential community administrators. And I think my most meaningful work there was the partnership we had with what was called the Medical Foundation for the Victims of Torture. And we created a safe place where group therapy could take place, but also respite for the service users, but also for people working for the organization. And what was really striking at that experience, these were people that had been tortured in their home country, but they talked about the second torture, about being here in the UK and taking so long before they got leave to remain, not being believed. Somebody I knew was already on the plane to be deported when he at the last moment was taken off because there was enough evidence. And it's hard to not to be believed, even now their physical wounds, still scars carried with them. And then in 2013, I had the opportunity to use an empty monastery to offer hospitality to destitute women and their children. And just to share a couple of lessons I have learned. No one comes empty-handed. Even if they have no possessions, they have their experience, they have their knowledge, they have this great desire to share, to contribute something. And that's, I think, is important what we take with us now in this project, that we need to see how we can create some kind of mutuality, because nobody wants to be just on the receiving end. So what we did, and actually that was a suggestion of one of the Syrian women, was that she had a restaurant back home and she really loved cooking food, so we created a kind of informal cafe. At first she cooked the food, but then how do you include the other women? And so at the end everybody did a dish, so we had dishes from Nigeria, Liberia, Syria, Russia, Iran, and I think it was the most exotic menu we had. And then in that situation they were not allowed to work or to study. So we started pottery and art and English lessons. And very important, we had volunteers that were also counselors, supporting the women, but also us, that we could check, I have this problem, how am I going to deal with it? So the real importance is that we have a great network around us, supporting the host and supporting the people, because that's the only way it's going to be sustainable. And then, I remember the great excitement when the first women arrived in our place. It feels great when you can do something. And I remember so clearly the day they arrived and they came out of the car, and one was a woman from Eritrea, and she couldn't stop saying, "Thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God." And that was very appropriate because at the end it was a monastery. But then the excitement goes. And then it's sometimes quite hard work to keep relations well. So for us, it helped that we had set up an agreement with the women, so that clear to them what they can expect from us, and what we expect from them. And it's so much better to do it from the beginning and not to wait till boundaries are crossed and problems occur. Do it from the beginning. And also we had regular gatherings around the table, so that we could discuss things where we're going, sometimes just about work that needs to be doing, but what was going on in our life, a check-in, and have that organized. It's just so much more, it's so much better than wait till problems arise. And then the other very important thing, I think, is that we have to create fun things. You know, it's not all about just the necessary things, but we did big birthday parties, or sometimes we would go out for the day, even was it just nearby park and have a picnic. Yeah. So yeah, what did I learn from that experience? I think for me it was, and that still is with me, is as soon as you sit around the table with people and you share food and you share stories, it is family. Yeah, sorry. It's just, it's so, I get emotional because it's just so beautiful, you know, despite, and I don't want to talk a romantic story here, because it is hard work, let's be clear about it, but also it's so incredibly enriching, and I think it's such a privilege if we can offer something of what we have to others, and enable others to offer something they have. So, let me finish then with the words I read yesterday from Mother Teresa. And she says, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten we belong to each other.
Thank you, Laia. That was really useful and powerful. Thank you. I'd like to introduce to you now Judith Bradbury, who is going to be hosting for Ukrainian refugees quite soon. So she's got in the process of what needs to be done and might give you some practical information. So 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to summary discussions. Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me at the back? Excellent. So I'm just going to give you my experience because I've been working on this for the last couple of weeks. Just a quick show of hands, who's registered for the Homes for Ukraine scheme? Okay. And of those, who has started the process of visa applications? Great, okay, perfect. So some of you already know some of the stuff I'm going to tell you and the nightmares of that process. I'm sorry, it is quite a torturous process. So I think the first thing that I want to talk about is how do you go about finding refugees? And I'm sorry to say that the government Homes for Ukraine scheme is not going to match you up with some refugees. I think a lot of people started out thinking that that was going to happen. And I think possibly sometime in the future, maybe in 6 months' time, they might have developed a process that's going to do that. But right now, if you've registered on that scheme, it makes it very, very clear, if you read all the way down to the small print, in this phase 1, you're expected to find your own refugees. And they suggest that you do that through charities or through contacts that you might have. I registered with, and I'm sure some of the rest of you have as well, I registered with Homes for Refugees, which is one of the charities that's looking to match people. They made it quite clear on their website that first of all they were overwhelmed, and secondly that they were going to look to match people in cities and towns that had good transport links. So I live in Ainik, so we have a bus twice a day, so clearly I'm not going to get matched through that particular scenario. And there's also another one called Shelter for UA, so it's shelter and then the number 4, UA, which is specifically for the Ukraine crisis. You do need a little bit of Ukrainian to get through the homepage, which is a bit tricky, because the homepage is all in Ukrainian, but anyway, if you manage to find your way through there, there is an English form that you can fill in. I filled that in, but I also haven't heard anything from them yet. So we found our refugees. I've got 2 sets of refugees coming. I've got a lady called Yulia and her daughter Katya, who's 13, and they're coming from Kiev. Their home is on the 16th floor of a block of flats in Kiev, which we think is still standing. They're not in Ukraine at the moment, but clearly that's under great threat. And then I've also got 2 teenage girls coming. One is 18 and the other is 17. They're currently in Poland, they're travelling on their own. They're from a place called Rivne, which is between Lviv and Kiev. They were in tertiary education in Ukraine, so they're just sort of displaced girls, and they're in Poland and at risk of trafficking and all those sorts of horrible things. So we found these two sets of refugees through friends of ours who are helping refugees. But the other place where people are finding refugees is on the Facebook groups. I know some people in the room have found families and people through the Facebook groups. There's one Facebook group called Homes for Ukraine Northumberland, which has a lot of really useful advice, specifically for those of us who are going through the process in Northumberland. I know that some of the charities are very anxious about people finding refugees through Facebook groups. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but I also think about those fantastic Berliners who were standing at the railway station in Berlin and who were just standing there with placards saying, I speak French or I speak Russian or whatever, and they were just taking people into their homes. So it's a bit of a balance really to try and find the best way to actually get the people here quickly. So then getting people here quickly. So when the government launched the Homes for Ukraine scheme on Monday the 14th of March, they then launched the visa process on Friday the 18th of March. So I applied for 2 of my visas on Friday the 18th of March, so that's over 2 weeks ago, and my people are still waiting to get their visas processed. I'm not gonna lie, the visa process is a bit of a nightmare. So the options are that you can fill in the visa as the sponsor, because it's a sort of a joint process. You have to be investigated and they have to be investigated. So either you fill it in on their behalf and you have to gather an awful lot of information from them, or they fill it in and they have to gather an awful lot of information from you to fill in the form. The Homes for Ukraine Northumberland Facebook site has actually, I think it's got a pinned post where somebody has actually gone through every single one of the questions that you need. So that's really, really helpful, because I had copies of the passports of the people that I'm sponsoring, but that wasn't enough. And thankfully, the lady who I was sponsoring on that day, when I did my first visa application, she was on the other end of Facebook Messenger, and she was there with answering the questions. There are a lot of questions, a lot of information that you need. The government said that they were making this a simplified process. I'd hate to see what a complicated process is, that's all I'm going to say. Just to give you an example, one of the questions was, have you ever had any other nationalities? Well, everybody that lives in Ukraine over a certain age will have had a previous nationality, which would have been the nationality of the Soviet Union. So are they supposed to put that down? That's not one of the options in the drop-down menu, but then they ask for documentation from your previous nationality. Well, these people are not in their homes, mostly. They're not going to, wait, let me just get my former Soviet Union passport before I leave, just in case I need that for where I'm going. So it's quite a lengthy process. I have been told that some of the people who are applying online, even if they've got all of the information that you need, may still be required to go to the visa application centres in Warsaw or wherever. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be the case for my people yet. The lady and her daughter that I'm sponsoring, they're actually in Bulgaria at the moment. So if they have to go to the visa application centre in Warsaw, then I don't know what I'm going to do. However, somebody who has been really, really helpful to me in this process, believe it or not, is Guy Opperman's office. So Guy Opperman's office has been super, super helpful, I know. Yeah, exactly. So the MPs have a hotline. They have a direct line to the Home Office, and they can find out for you how your visa application is progressing. So I have been in contact with Guy's office several times now, and they've been really super. I mean, the first time they got back to me really quickly, the next couple of times not so fast, but I guess they're quite busy now. So please use that, because that's what they're there for. The other person who's been extremely helpful, I mean, I think locally we've got some really, really brilliant people, is a lady called Dan Munro, who is the asylum seeker and refugee liaison at Northumberland County Council. Super, super helpful. And she has got access to the entire database of everybody in Northumberland who has applied for a visa. So all of you people who are hosts, she's got you on a list. She knows who you are and she knows where you live. And she is the person who's sending out the fire safety check people to come and check you, because you have to have a fire safety check and a police DBS check as part of this process. And at one point we thought that that was an intrinsic part of the process and that visas wouldn't be granted until that check had taken place. But I'm now led to believe that that link has been broken. I think part of the problem here is it's being made up as they go along, right? It's being made up as they go along. Sorry, Ariana, do you want me to wrap up? I had a couple more things I was going to say. And I suppose that's my thread, is that there's just a lack of information because it's so new. So, for example, I've been trying to sort out school places for the people who are coming to stay with me. I've spoken to QE, they've said that they're waiting for Northumberland County Council. Northumberland County Council have said they're waiting for the Department for Education. So it's a really slow process. I've been to the Jobs Centre and I've asked them what their processes are. They don't know, they haven't been told yet. But the government website makes it quite clear that these refugees are entitled to work from the minute they arrive here, as long as they're over 18. They're entitled to the full range of benefits that they would be entitled to whilst they're looking for work. They're entitled to child benefit, they're entitled to universal credit, they're entitled to disability allowance and all of those sorts of things. So none of that should be an impediment, but the processes, you know, so also getting bank accounts. I've spoken to HSBC yesterday, they don't know yet how to do it. Oh, and just one more thing before I stop. If you are hosting people, you have to notify your mortgage provider, which is something I found out yesterday. So the banks are all prepared to help, but you need to let them know, because it's obviously they're treating it as having a lodger, which is ridiculous. But anyway, I better wrap up. I'm here if anybody wants to ask any more questions. So.
Thank you very much, Judith. There's a lot of detail there which was very useful, I'm sure, for a lot of people here. We will end up with a situation, we're hoping, where there will be project groups that will deal with the various items that Judith mentioned, if that is what people wish here. But right now we're scoping, so we're trying to work out what interests, what resources, what needs are in this room and in Hexham to set up a structure to go forward efficiently. Thanks, Judith. Right, next we have Jenny. Most of you have filled in the survey, and Jenny just wants to briefly tell you the results of that, and then we will move on to the breakout discussion.
Hello. Just very quickly, we've had our survey on the go now for 2 weeks. It came about because we kept individually being asked questions which we had no answers to, and lots of people wanting to offer help and not knowing where to offer it. So we thought at that point the best thing to do was just try and capture it all. So that's why we started the survey. We've had 130 people in those 2 weeks fill it in, 43% of whom are planning to host themselves, and a very large percentage wanting to support those who are hosting and the refugees they host. A range of offers, concerns, ideas. We tried to capture those in the grid that's on the coloured grid on your tables, just a sort of high-level summary of what people have been talking about. Our mailing list is based on that survey, so if you haven't filled it in, the links are on your tables. There's a QR code, there's a URL, and if you're not comfortable with those things, or you just don't use tech, you speak to our technical assistants, and they'll be able to fill it in for you or along with you. So at some point during this session or afterwards, have a word with them. So I think Ariane's already explained what we're hoping is coming out of today. One other thing we're hoping is that in the course of discussion, as things come up that you think would be good to have on a website or a good way to use a website, we have a website available which needs to be populated, and we'll put up a flip chart at the front and just put post-its on it with the thoughts about what we could have on it and what would be the most useful thing to put up there. I think that's enough of that. Thank you.
I'm going to be the last speaker before we ask you to go into breakout groups. So in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you what we heard from the breakout groups on Wednesday night. So on Wednesday, we invited community groups, public sector, the school systems, the NHS, churches, like sort of a broad section of society. And we, based on the survey data that we had compiled from 100 people, we had workout groups for fundraising, for networking in Hexham and beyond. We had how to provide different types of support, the hosting, and supporting those who are actually considering hosting families. So the feedback generally was that in terms of fundraising, we need to think about cash, and we need to think about long-term support to the people who will be coming to the Hexham area. I hate just saying refugees all the time. But also, there could be a strand of networking for Poland and the other countries who are going to be overwhelmed in the next few years. So it was all about cash. The networking group talked about the necessity to create links on a local level, on a regional level, on a national level. And over again, the role of the church came out in the groups. Some of that is due to the religious backgrounds of the people who are going to be migrating to different countries, but also churches already have their own versions of communities. And so maybe that's something to be tapped into. The necessity to lobby, to do policy and advocacy work to the government. If each one of us wrote a letter to Guy Opperman and did an open letter asking for no visas, maybe they would listen, because they do listen. This government changes its strategies based on if a few people start complaining. So they will listen to you if you actually just take the time and to hold your leaders to account. There's no reason for these visas right now. They can suspend them. We talked about setting up social infrastructure for the hosting families. Who wants to teach English? Who wants to do the learning element? The care, the social support, the financial resources, both in terms of finding jobs for people and also giving them that stable, secure source of funding for a certain, for a year or so. So can we each, or some of us, give a direct debit monthly for a certain period of time so either the host families or the people who are coming over here know how much money they have to work off of every month. We also talked about the need for community for coordination. Ariana, Jenny, and I do not want to be leading on this. We need to ensure that there are different groups, different coordination groups, people supporting each other, and just somehow we can feed back, and some of us can work on those slightly different scales as well. And also the necessity for different types of aid and support, whether it's medicine, food, computers, anything like that. So we're really hoping that in the next hour, Ariana is going to organize the working groups, but we want to come up with that next step, in the next days. So who wants to work on what topic? Who would like to even coordinate? And then we can have these sort of loose groups that support each other. So that's all I'm going to say now. And for us to communicate with you, we really need your email addresses or your mobile numbers. So if you haven't updated your information through that survey, you can do it again manually through James and Julian, because there's no other way we can find you. Okay, Ariana, do you want to do the breakout groups? Not at the moment. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have just one extra addition for 2 minutes, Hannah, if that's all right. I've got Wendy here, who's come all the way from Northumberland County of Sanctuary. Northumberland County of Sanctuary, and we're really pleased she's here. We weren't sure she was going to be able to come or not. And she would just like to give you 2 minutes if possible, Wendy. I know it's hard, but we will follow up with that. If you can just speak to people, thank you.
Yes. We have a base in Ashington because the government basically houses asylum seekers and refugees in the cheapest housing there is. And we have dealt over the last 5 years with well over 400 people, families and young men who are at a loss. We've managed to work with other organisations, because we're all just a bunch of ancient volunteers like me. And we've found the Red Cross are completely and utterly brilliant. And they do all the legal side of things. We don't touch that. We've managed to persuade the colleges that they will take asylum seekers, let alone refugees. So get people into courses at the colleges. I mean, there are things like this that we can guide you to, that we have already, wheels we've already got in motion. Things that people we've already kicked over and made them do what we want them to do. Because as you realise, there are those who still wait for the government to tell them. You can't wait for the government to tell you what it's going to do, because it doesn't know. So when you come to thinking about organisations, you know, we are here already. We've got 4 years experience with people of about 30 different nationalities, and lots can be done. It's amazing what can be done. So enjoy.
Thank you, Wendy. So that was Wendy from Northumberland County of Sanctuary, and I assume you've got a website, haven't you? Yes. So if you Google that, great. Now, this is where you all come in. We have quite limited space, so we'll have to just shuffle up a bit. We want to get you into discussion groups now. There will be 3 types of discussion groups, and you can join whichever you think is useful for you. You don't have to join any if you prefer not to be in a discussion group. So the first one is fundraising. There will be some people who want to talk about short-term, medium and long-term strategy of fundraising. That could be focusing on UK activity, like local needs, or abroad, anywhere that's hosting refugees at the moment. Second group number, so where are we going to put the first group, Hannah?
The fundraising group is going to be up here, so around here.
Okay. So next we've got the hosting group, and the third group is going to be the supporting the hosts group. This is supporting structure. So those people who can't host but want to support the hosts in Hexham.
So we're going to put everyone who is interested to host. We would like you to go to the back of the room, and so we can just generally see what are the numbers. And I think we're just going to have to break you up into 2 different groups, or So hosting, people who want to host or planning on hosting are in the back. Tables number 1 and 2. Fundraising is up here at table 6. And then in the middle part of the room, which are tables 3 and 4 and 5, are the people who want to support the refugees in any other way that is not hosting.
And we will have a facilitator for each group to keep you on track, because we have 25 minutes for this exercise and we want to keep on time. The purpose of the groups are to discuss 2 topics. 1, what is already happening, what resources already exist. The second question is, what are you able or willing to contribute? Okay, please find your seats. Thank you.